What is up, my people? Welcome to another video. And today I want to talk boxing. I've been trying to hold off on this particular subject with Turkey alalshikh shaking hands with the devil, Dana White, the white devil, because his last name is White. That's what I'm saying. It is not racial. It's actually the first time I heard White Devil was from the movie Ace Ventura, When Nature Calls, I believe. Um, what's it called? Watatuchu, something like that. It's one of my favorite movies ever. Um, but but yeah, I mean, the reason I didn't want to touch on it, and I was kind of holding off on talking about it. By the way, this is me. Um, that's actually how I wear my pants, and it's definitely not my. That's definitely my real body, and it wasn't like, AI, Snapchat, or anything like that. That's how I wear my pants, and I usually play golf like this. But anyways, back to the subject of today, guys. I was holding off on it because there's no way to look at this um situation and not think about politics, and not think about the state of affairs here in the United States, the way things are moving and the way things are progressing in a way that just seems it just everything just seems like it's going into the same direction, which is money over everything. It's just kind of like a hyper capitalist society, or a um, hyper what do you call it, a hyper oligarchy. I don't know why I couldn't say that. Hyper oligarchy, because boxing, to me, it's entertainment, right? And entertainment should always be open to free market, in my opinion. Because it's entertainment. It's not that serious. And monopolizing the industry, in my opinion, is going to be bad for boxing. And you don't want to do that. You don't want to monopolize boxing. You want to leave it the way it is now. And of course, for other more serious things, like healthcare, and um, like even the airlines, or national defense, or things like that. Those things I do believe should be governed by social programs and by one entity. Why? Because these things are more important. These things can't be left up to who has better promotions. This is serious business. People's lives are at stake when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to these types of things. And that's why I brought that up. That's why, because I did touch on that, and I didn't explain why I was touching on that. But that's the reason. Because we don't need one umbrella in boxing, because it's not that serious. And that's what bothers me, is that people want pretty much you know what they need, they want it for entertainment instead of putting it in other things. And I think it just shows the stupidity of Americans, in my opinion. And I am an American, but I gotta admit, we're just not all there. Um, well, for those of you that don't know, Turki alalshikh recently decided to um, make a deal with Dana White and create a new promotional company, which is what it is. It's a promotional company. Even though Turkey is kind of calling it a league, um, a new league of boxing, and and so the move was this. Like, this is the final move for Turkey. This is what he was trying to do since the beginning, and the people kind of agree with him, because the whole alphabet titles becomes too complicated for people, and people tend to not want to use their brains too much sometimes, and they want it simple. You've never heard me personally in this channel say that I want the alphabet titles to disappear. I have said that I'm ignorant in them, and that I don't know who the WBC or the WBO or the WBA, all these different types of sanctioning bodies. I don't really care for them too much, but I do know the history behind them, and I do know the appeal for these alphabet titles and the appeal for being undisputed. It's a big deal for a reason. It's because it's so hard to accomplish. Um, and in the past, it wasn't necessarily because of the politics involved in boxing and because of the sides of the streets and all of this stuff. It was mainly because it was just hard to beat champions, because champions are good. Champions means that if you're a champion, that means that you beat a bunch of guys that are good. There were contenders, there were number one and number two ranked, number three ranked, number five ranked. You beat the best of the best in that division, and you beat the best of the best in in that federation. Um, and and it meant something because it means that you're the best of the best when you became undisputed. The thing is, when you eliminate the alphabet titles, you're not going to get that anymore. You're not going to get undisputed. You're only going to have one belt for each, um, weight class. In my personal opinion, the belts, the alphabet belts, were never the problem. I personally always thought that there was too many weight classes. There was too many weight classes. Back in the day, I guess it was like featherweight, lightweight, welterweight, middleweight, um, super middleweight, and then super heavyweight, and then heavyweight. It was very simple, which is why it was so hard to move up in weight, and which is why what Roberto Duran did back in the day, and what I forgot the other guy's name, but there's another guy that also did it. That's why it was so hard, because you had to actually be built differently to even think of doing that. And that's really what I was on when I said that there was too many belts. I was talking about that. I wasn't talking about um, the alphabet titles. I was talking about the weight classes. There was too many of them. And the reason there were so many of them is because um, the the people that make these belts, they wanted to give more people opportunity, so that there'll be more people paying for these belts, because the fighters pay for the belts. When they win, they pay a sanctioning fee or something, whatever it's called. And they have to pay it, right? And that's money for the set alphabet title, right? And so if you make more weight classes, there's more opportunity for more people to join, and because there's more opportunity for more people to join, you get paid more, right? And that's why they did it. Now, of course, you could see this in two ways. You could see it in a way to where it's like, okay, more people are getting opportunities to become champions and to compete, which is a good thing. So none of these things are bad, in my opinion. I feel like what you gotta understand and what people need to see is that at the moment, the only people that are having trouble making fights and the only people that seem to not want to fight are American fighters. Okay, if you look at Riyadh season, if you look at all these fights that are happening, um, boxing is in a good spot all around the world. Boxing is in a good place in the Orient or in Asia. Sorry, right? So you got Inoue, you got Nakatani, you got all of these great fighters over there fighting each other. So they're flourishing over there. Mexico, the same thing. You got a bunch of champions, a bunch of Mexican champions. Um, Europe is the same thing. You know, everywhere you see, everywhere you turn, boxing is flourishing and is making money because people are fighting each other. People are doing what they do. But here in the United States, it's not the case. So it's not a boxing problem per se. It's an American boxing problem. And when people say, oh, we need to get rid of this, we need to get rid of that, we don't really need to get rid of any of that shit. What we need to do is get rid of the American boxing culture. Because the American boxing culture is what is killing boxing here in America. Because in the rest of the world, like I said before, it's flourishing. You look at the last card that we had that was supposed to be the card of the century, with Bebo versus Beterbiev, and it was supposed to be Shakur versus Schofield, and so many other fighters that joined Turkey and Riyadh season to create the fight of the card of the century. And you notice that the first person that backed out of the fight was an American in Schofield. And you don't hear him trying to make that fight happen again. You don't hear him trying to oh, it was a mistake, but I'm going to get right back on it and I'm going to try my best to get this fight. You don't see that. Because Schofield was never really trying to get that fight. Schofield was in it for the clout, which is an American-made thing. Americans made that shit up. Clout chasing, all of that noise shit. That's an American concept. It means that you're just fluff. It means that you're all talk. It means that you're all smoke, but you got no fire. And that's what's popular to do these days. And that's why they were calling out Shakur. And listen, Shakur is not my favorite either. Shakur is not necessarily a guy who's fighting all the top dogs. A guy who's fought anybody that's even relevant, right? So I'm not here to defend Shakur. I'm here to say Shakur's American, just like Schofield. So if he wasn't gonna back off, Schofield was gonna. I mean, if Schofield wasn't gonna back off, Shakur might have came up with an excuse himself. Because it's just the way it is, bro. Like, these fighters not fighting each other. They're not fighting unless they're absolutely sure that they're either gonna make top dollar or they're gonna be in an easy fight. Okay, and it's embedded in the culture of America to do these types of bitch moves. All right, and I'm gonna explain it to you. It's like, and it goes all across the culture of America, right? In this country, the main thing you want to do, or the goal for every person here in the United States, is to eventually do less for more money. That's the goal here. So whatever it is you do, be it landscaping, be in art, or be in music, or maybe you're a boxer, the number one goal is, at the beginning, you're going to be working very hard. You're going to be fighting 4 times a year. If you're doing landscaping, you're going to be cutting down trees. You're going to be trimming, bushes and pulling out roots out of the ground. And you're going to be out there with the machete, chopping down branches and shit. It's going to be very painful in the beginning. But then eventually you're going to get a managerial position and you're going to be doing a little bit less. Maybe you get a nice company car and you'll be able to sit in the car every once in a while with the air conditioning looking at the other people work. And then next thing you know, you get an upgrade. You get promoted to something bigger than that. Now you're not sitting in a car. Now you're sitting in an office. You don't even have to go out there to the field at all. You just have to organize shit. But guess what? You're gonna get paid way more. And then you get your own company, and then you don't even know what a tree looks like anymore. you know, that's the goal here in America. That's what everybody strives for. And if they don't do it to themselves, if they don't reach that goal themselves, their kids are going to do it for them. And it's their goal for their kids to do it. And the same thing goes with boxing. The thing about boxing is that boxing used to be a slave's sport, even here in America. Yeah, it used to be a slave sport. You got paid shit, as a fighter. But boxing, a lot of people in civil rights and looking out for the boxers began to get into boxing, and you got the Ali Act, and you got all of these other organizations that are trying to do what's best for the fighter because they've seen a lot of sad shit in the past. You got Tommy Hearns selling T-shirts or some shit. I forgot what he was selling. You know, and it's sad, bro, to see these boxers that once gave us these um, fond memories and great emotions that we had because of them, to see them suffer and to see them not have a home, um, and stuff like that, and but then the first time I saw it change was Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya was the first one that I personally saw. I'm sure a lot of people hate Oscar, but I gotta give him props. He was the first guy to have a life outside of boxing, and he became a promoter, and he became um, a guy that made it possible for boxers to have a life outside of boxing. And it wasn't so much so about what he was doing in the ring, but it was what he was doing outside the ring. And and then from them, Mayweather and all the other ones that came after Oscar, they took up that same mentality of being able to build a better life for themselves through boxing. And the reason I'm talking about this is because boxing, you know, doesn't need MMA, and it never did need MMA, and it doesn't need a slave master to come and show us how to do boxing. You know, does American boxing need to die in a sense? Yes. In my opinion, it does because the people aren't fighting each other. People aren't doing that because of the culture. And maybe if it dies, it's gonna take either it dying or a stranger coming in trying to take over for American boxers to start to act right. And so Dana White. Let's talk about Dana White and why I'm so opposed to Dana White. And um, Dana White has never been known to pay his fighters very well. In fact, the only time his fighters get paid really good is when they come to boxing and they box. So why, in my opinion, why the fuck would we ever even listen to a guy like Dana White to tell us what is good for boxing. And I've heard crazy shit being said by the boxing community. Things like, oh, these boxers need to get paid less so that they could go back to fighting. You know what that is called, my friend? That's pretty much slavery. But unfortunately, a lot of people these days, they have become peasants, and they're almost like craving a lord and savior to come and save them and give them money and throw money at them, and they'll do anything for them. And it's kind of sad because it creates a mentality of subservience, a mentality of, like I said, of peasants defending their lords. And I mean, I could understand if you were getting paid by these guys, if these people were paying you to promote them. And to a certain extent, as a fan, I understand that you want cheaper fights and you want to see the fights, and I understand that part of it. But you got to understand as well that if we go back to a time where boxers didn't have a life outside of boxing, to a time where boxers, were just little more than slaves, that's not good for boxing. From my point of view, as a guy just sitting down, it would be selfish of me to just be like, yeah, but the fights, we're gonna get the fights. And yeah, we're just gonna get the fights. And then at a certain point, I was like, yeah, I only care about the fights. But then you start looking at who Turkey is shaking hands with, and now that's when I realized, okay, now I understand. Because the thing is, Turkey, he sat at the table with the heads of boxing. He sat with Oscar. He sat with Bob. He sat with Eddie Hearn. He sat with the other guy from Queensbury, and he realized that boxing has a good spine, has good pillars, that he can't dismantle it, not in the way that he wants to, but there's somebody else outside of boxing that he could reach out to. There's somebody else that has the same mentality that he has, a mentality of, I could buy anything, right? And that's Dana White. Okay, so all through and through, I don't like what I see when it comes to this deal, this handshaking between these two people. It lets me know for sure what Turkey stands for. And as long as these rights are still going to be held, as long as we're going to be, okay with paying boxers the amount that they have been paid and more, I feel like that's fine. But if we're going to regress to whatever MMA is, because let me tell you something, like MMA, the reason Dana White went into MMA, he didn't go into boxing, was because of all the rights that boxers have, and because of all the progressive movements in boxing that look out for the boxer, that look out for the worker. He doesn't like that. Dana White doesn't like that shit. And anybody that even remotely resembles anything like that, he kicks out of his league. Dana White, he didn't invent the UFC. The UFC was a company that was, on its way out because it was being attacked by the government. The government didn't like it. You remember John McCain used to talk shit about MMA and the UFC, and said it was a brutal sport, that it had nothing to do with an actual sport or whatever, that it was just brutality. And Dana White saw a dying company here in the U.S., Of course, abroad in Japan, it was doing well with Pride, and in Brazil and South America, it was also doing well with Bellator. And so, but here in the U.S., not so much. And so, Dana White saw an opportunity. He saw a beaten horse, a dying company, and his cheap ass went like, "Yeah, I'll buy it, and not only will I buy it, but I'm gonna pay these fighters shit." And in those days, you didn't have to be a professional. You didn't have to be trained in anything. You could just go in there with one glove and be like, "Yeah, I'm a boxer, karateka," and it's okay, cool, you're in. And you didn't have to do none of that shit. And that's perfect for Dana because he doesn't want to pay for licensings and all that type of shit. Now it's probably different. But what I'm saying is the mentality behind somebody like that is we're just going to get it done as fast as we can. And if we don't have to pay people, we won't. The better it is. And that's really what's wrong with this country. Because if you look outside of boxing and outside of martial arts, you look at how AI is taking over and how people are already in fear of losing their jobs. There's already people losing jobs already, getting kicked out. Amazon let a lot of people go recently. A bunch of other companies are letting a lot of people go because they're not going to need a lot of people. They're going to replace them with robots. If they don't have to pay you, they won't. They simply won't. And let's not kid ourselves. The Saudis are very, very down with slavery. In fact, we're down with slavery. Americans are. We don't call it slavery. Well, think about it. What do you think immigrants are? Immigrants don't have rights. Immigrants don't need any type of paperwork or anything. You don't have to pay them that much either. And if they say they say anything and they get out of line, what are you gonna do? You're gonna deport their asses. And then, if you wanna get the American people behind you, you just talk shit about them, and your numbers will rise up on the polls, and you'll start to win. You kick them out, let them in later, put them back in these stupid jobs, as these trash jobs, and pretend like they're the ones causing all the problems. I mean, these guys, immigrants, are slaves. All right, um, so that's what I see, and I see the thing about boxing, and what I love about boxing is that it shows you what's going on in the real world. It's almost like a reflection of the real world, and it's never let me down in that sense to where I can see it happening and translate to boxing. The thing is, um, I don't know what's gonna happen, because will this be successful? I don't know, because like I said, boxing has these big roots and it's a very old tree that's not gonna go down unless, and trust me, they've been trying to dismantle it. And here in the US, it's kind of dying. It's kind of on its way out. Um, but maybe this is what it's gonna take for boxing to wake up, for the De La Hoyas and the Bob Arams and the even the Al Haymans to wake up and realize that they need to stop searching for that Floyd Mayweather. That's not what's up. But maybe good things can come from this. In my opinion, I'm just wondering what we're gonna learn from a guy who barely even pays their fighters, from a guy who has to come to boxing to make top dollar. What the fuck are we gonna learn from him? This guy does things in the old way. Boxing has moved on from that. And if boxing is even thinking of going back to those days, I'm sorry, dude, but that's not the way. And yeah, it is what it is, man. And I think here in the U.S., the only ones that are even alive remotely is MVP boxing. I think it's MVP or VIP, something like that. With Jake Paul over at Netflix. They're the only ones that actually have a deal in place. Most networks are dropping boxing because boxing is not that popular here in the U.S. In Mexico, it's a religion. In Eastern Europe, it's also a religion. It's a way of life over there. In the UK, I mean, look at the numbers they're doing with guys that have a rivalry. They're not even that good, but they love watching that rivalry between Eubank and the other guy. I forgot his name. So here in the U.S., it's about this fake idea of immortality. This fake idea that we think that not losing is everything. It's embedded in our culture as well. We just can't take a loss. We don't like people making mistakes, and even if they make mistakes, you can't acknowledge that you're making mistakes. You can't say, "Oh, I was wrong about that." That's it. For some reason here in America, that shows signs, that shows weakness. We're just not mature enough, and I don't know. The Netflix deal with the whole Jake Paul thing seems like it's gonna be the future of American boxing, and if that's the case, it's gonna be a little more than wrestling, a little more than WrestleMania. Is it gonna be entertaining? Of course it is. I'm gonna tune in. But is it gonna be real boxing? No. And listen, that happens to every martial arts. It goes through stages. It has different paths that it takes. And for example, wrestling. Professional wrestling used to be real, but it used to be too real. It used to be too real to the point where it was too brutal. People was dying. People was losing arms, legs. Because back in the day, true wrestling was if I grab your hand, I'm breaking it. There's no holds. There's none of that. It's I break it, plain and simple. If I slam you, that's probably gonna be spinal injuries. Ain't no shit to where it's modified to where you're gonna survive. No, ain't no cushioning of the ring. These guys were fighting in pits, in actual pits. That's where the term snake pit comes from. Because they were fighting in pits. They grab it, they break it. That was the rule. That's why it's called catch wrestling. It was called that. But it was too brutal. People were losing it. People were losing hands. People were it just wasn't good for business. It wasn't good look for society as a whole. So they had to modify it, and that's how professional wrestling became what it is today. A little more than a show. Is it real moves? Does it hurt? Yes, but the outcome has already been set, and the moves have been modified to be less deadly. But in its original form, wrestling was brutal. People lost their lives. Um, but that's probably going to be the future of boxing. And then what happens is they modify it and it becomes more like a show. And then after that, a new sport comes underneath it that's more realistic. And I think that's the UFC. But it's a cycle, man. Martial arts goes through cycles. But we're just gonna see. We're just gonna see what happens. Anyways, guys, this is gonna be it for today. Please like, comment, and subscribe.